23. Oscar Senger. Use of records in vocal study. Mr. Oscar Senger has been termed maker of artists since a number of our great singers have come from under his capable hands. He has a rare gift for imparting instruction in a way that is concise and convincing. A man of wide experience, profound knowledge of his subject, commanding personality, and winning courtesy, he impresses all who come within his radius that he knows whereof he speaks. A man who knows what he knows is one to be followed. Mr. Senger had just returned from a season of travel over America as far as the coast. A most profitable trip, he called it, filled with many interesting and unique experiences. He had been lecturing also in a number of cities on his new method of vocal study with the aid of the Victor talking machine. When he learned I had come expressly to ask for his ideas on vocal technique and study, he said, "I think you will be interested to hear about my latest hobby, the study of singing with the aid of records." Then he plunged at once into the most absorbingly interesting account of his ideas and achievements in this line I had ever listened to. Teacher, artist, and accompanist in one. This is my own idea of combining the teacher, artist, and accompanist in one trinity, he began. And, by the way, my idea is now patented in Washington. It is the result of 9 years' thought and labor before the idea could be brought out in its finished form. The design has been to make the method and its elucidation so simple that the girl from a small town can understand it. The method consists of 20 lessons for each of the 5 kinds of voices: soprano, mezzo-soprano, tenor, baritone, and bass. Each portfolio holds 20 records, together with a book containing minute directions for studying and using the records. I believe that anyone with good intelligence who wishes to learn to sing can take the book and records and begin his studies, even though he has never sung before. He can thus prepare himself for future lessons. For you must understand, this method is not meant to replace the teacher, but to aid the teacher. I can assure you it aids him in ways without number. It gives him a perfect exemplar to illustrate his principles. If he be fatigued or unable to sing the passage in question, here is an artist who is never wearied, who is always ready to do it for him. I myself constantly use the records in my lessons. If I have taught a number of consecutive hours, it is a relief to turn to the artist's record and save my own voice. Simplicity. As I have said, the design has been to make everything plain and simple. I wrote the book and sent it to the Victor people. They returned it, saying I had written an excellent book, but it was not simple enough. They proposed sending a man to me who was neither a musician nor a singer. If I could make my meaning clear enough for him to understand, it was likely the girl from a little western town could grasp it. So this man came and we worked together. If I talked about head tones, he wanted to know what I meant. If about throaty tones, I had to make these clear to him. When he understood, I was sure anyone could understand. Thus the books as they stand came into being. The records themselves represent an immense amount of care and effort. Will you believe we had to make over 2,000 in order to secure the 100 needed for the present series? The slightest imperfection is enough to render an otherwise perfect record useless. Even the artists themselves would sometimes become discouraged at the enormous difficulties. It is nerve-wracking work, for one must be on tension all the time. Imitation of fundamental principle. If you are interested, I will go a little more into detail. The main idea of this unique method of study is imitation. Every human being likes to imitate, from the tiny child to the adult. Acting upon this idea, we take the artist as model. Everything the model does, the student strives to imitate. By means of the record, it is possible for the student to do this over and over again until he has learned to copy it as accurately as it is possible. And here is where the knowledge and experience of the teacher come in. During the lesson, he tests each tone, each phrase, advising the pupil how nearly he approaches the perfect model, or showing him his faults and why he does not succeed in imitating the model more correctly. For beginners. Do you mean to say, Mr. Senger, that this method of vocal study can be taken up by one who knows really nothing of the voice or singing and can be used with success, that such a person can become a singer through self-study? It is indeed possible, was the answer, and it is being done every day. If the student has much intelligence, determination, and concentration, she can learn to sing from these directions and these records. They are a great boon to young aspirants in small towns, where there are really no good teachers. In such places, local teachers can study and teach from these records. Again, you often find people too shy or too ashamed to go to a teacher for a voice trial or lessons. They want to sing. Everyone would like to do that, but they don't know how to go at it. With these records, they can begin to study and thus get ready for later lessons. With these records, those who are far from a music center can have the benefit of expert instruction at small cost. I might work with a pupil for several months in the ordinary way, without the records, and not be able to teach him even with half the accuracy and quickness obtainable by the new method. The accompanist. All singers know how important, how necessary it is to have services of an expert accompanist. The student of this method has one at hand every hour of the day, a tireless accompanist who is willing to repeat without complaint as often as necessary. The speaking voice. A very important branch of the work for the would-be singer is to cultivate the speaking voice. Tones in speaking should always be made beautiful and resonant. Even in children, a pleasant quality of voice in speaking can be acquired. Mothers and teachers can be trained to know and produce beautiful tones. The ear must be cultivated to know a pure, beautiful tone and to love it. Breathing exercises. The management of the breath is a most important factor, as the life of the tone depends on the continuance of the breath. The student must cultivate the power of quickly inhaling a full breath and of exhaling it so gradually that she can sing a phrase lasting from 10 to 20 seconds. This needs months of arduous practice. In all breathing, inhale through the nose. The lower jaw during singing should be entirely relaxed. The tone should be focused just back of the upper front teeth. The way to place the tone forward is to think it forward. The student must think the tone into place. To attack a tone is to sing it at once, without any scooping and with free open throat. When the throat is tightened, the student loses power to attack her tones in the right way. Phrasing. Phrasing, in a limited sense, is simply musical punctuation. In its broader sense, it is almost synonymous with interpretation. For it has to do not only with musical punctuation, but with the grouping of tones and words in such a way that the composition is rendered intelligible as a whole, so as to express the ideas of the composer. This is where the intellectual and musical qualities of the singer are brought into requisition. She must grasp the content, whether it be song or aria, in order to effect this grouping intelligently. Accent, crescendo, and diminuendo are the most important factors in phrasing. From the very beginning, the student should be careful how and where she takes breath and gives accent. There must always be a reason, and thought will generally make the reason clear. Tone production. The first thing to be considered is the position of the body, for beauty of tone cannot be obtained unless all efforts harmonize to produce the desired result. An easy, graceful, buoyant position is essential. It can be cultivated in front of a mirror from the first lesson. Tone production is the result of thought. Picture to yourself a beautiful tone. Sing it on the vowel ah. If you stood in rapture before an entrancing scene, you would exclaim, "Ah, how beautiful!" Producing a beautiful tone rests on certain conditions. First, breath control. Second, freedom of throat. Third, correct focus of tone. We know that a stiff jaw and tongue are the greatest hindrances to the emission of good tone. Muscles of chin and tongue must be trained to become relaxed and flexible. Do not stiffen the jaw or protrude the chin, else your appearance will be painful and your tones faulty. To think the tone forward is quite as important as to sing it forward. Without the mental impression of correct placing, the reality cannot exist. It is much better to think the tone forward for 5 minutes and sing 1 minute than to practice the reverse. One should practice in 15-minute periods and rest at least 10 minutes between. The student should never sing more than 2 hours a day, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. As most singers love their work, many are inclined to overdo. Do not tamper with the 2 or 3 extreme upper or lower tones of your voice lest you strain and ruin it permanently. Never practice when suffering from a cold. Ideal attack is the tone which starts without any scooping, breathiness, or explosiveness. Breathe noiselessly, the secret of which is to breathe from down up. Faulty emissions of tone are nasal, guttural, throaty, and tremulous. I will give you examples of all these from the record number 33, which will show you first the fault and then the perfect example. If the pupil studies these perfect emissions of tone and tries to imitate them, there is no need for her to have the common faults mentioned. Sustained tones. The next step is to study sustained tones. As you see, the artist begins in the middle of her voice, always the best way, and sings a whole tone on A, with the syllable A, always waiting a whole measure for the pupil to imitate the tone. Next she sings a flat, and so on down to lower A, the pupil imitating each tone. She now returns to middle A and ascends by half steps to E natural, the pupil copying each tone after it is sung by the artist. The tone should be free, round and full, but not loud, and the aim be to preserve the same quality throughout. Do not throw or push the tone, but spin it. Uniting several tones. We first begin by uniting 2 tones, smoothly and evenly, then 3 in the same way. After each pair or group of tones, the accompaniment is repeated and the pupil imitates what the artist has just sung. Now comes the uniting of 5 tones, up and down, after this the scale of 1 octave. The scale should be sung easily with moderate tone quality. A slight accent can be given to the first and last tones of the scale. We all realize the scale is one of the most important exercises for the building of the voice. The preceding exercises have prepared for it. Arpeggios. For imparting flexibility to the voice, nothing can exceed the arpeggio, but like all vocal exercises, it must be produced with precision of tone, singing each interval clearly, with careful intonation, always striving for beauty of tone. There are various forms of arpeggios to be used. The second form is carried a third above the octave, the third form a fifth above. This makes an exercise which employs every tone in the scale save 1 and gives practice in rapid breathing. Remember that the note before, taking breath, is slightly shortened in order to give time for taking breath without disturbing the rhythm. The trill. The trill is perhaps the most difficult of all vocal exercises, unless the singer is blessed with a natural trill, which is a rare gift. We begin with quarter notes, then add eighths and sixteenths. This exercise, if practiced daily, will produce the desired result. It is taken on each tone of the voice, trilling in major seconds. Vocalizes. The purpose of vocalizes is to place and fix the voice accurately and to develop taste, while singing rhythmically and elegantly. The records give some concone exercises, ably interpreted by one of our best-known voices. You hear how even and beautiful are the tones sung, and you note the pauses of 4 measures between each phrase to allow the student to repeat the phrase as before. I firmly believe this method of study is bound to revolutionize vocal study and teaching. You see, it goes to the very foundation and trains the student to imitate the best models. It even goes farther back to the children, teaching them how to speak and sing correctly, always making beautiful tones without harshness or shouting. Young children can learn to sing tones and phrases from the records. Furthermore, I believe the time is coming when the technique and interpretation of every instrument will be taught in this way. It is my intention to follow up this set of foundational records by others which will demonstrate the interpretation of songs and arias as they are sung by our greatest artists. The outlook is almost limitless. And now, do you think I have answered your questions about tone production, breath control, and the rest? Perhaps I have, as convincingly as an hour's talk can do.